Hi, I'm Kevin Hatley and welcome to Kevin Hatley Photography in my office. This is a channel that I've set up to share my experiences of wildlife and nature with others. So let's go. Not until here in the 1980s, this sight of a red kite in our skies was a rare sight to be seen. Following years of persecution, a reintroduction programme was begun during the 1990s, and the red kite is slowly becoming a bit more common to see in our skies again. So what I want to do in this video is share with you my knowledge and experience of photographing the red kite, and what we'll do is we'll look at how to identify them. We'll look at their habitat and where we can find them here in the UK. We'll look at some of the behaviour, and then I'll share with you my approach to photographing the red kite, and I'll share some top tips along the way. Okay, so how do we identify the red kite? Well, they're very large birds of prey and they have a very distinctive forked tail. That is the giveaway sign of the red kite, is the distinctive forked tail. They have a wingspan of up to 5 foot in length, with a reddish brown body, black tipped wings. They have a silver greyish head with a very distinctive yellow eye, and they have a black tipped yellow beak. When it comes to the males and the females, males and females have very similar plumage, very difficult just to tell them apart by the plumage. However, the females tend to be slightly larger than the males. Some people can get a bit confused over identifying or comparing the red kite with the buzzard. So the way to tell the difference between a buzzard and a red kite is that, again, I go back to how distinctive that forked tail is on the red kite, whereas the buzzard has a fan-shaped tail, and the buzzard tends to be slightly smaller than the red kite. When it comes to their calls, the red kite and the buzzard have kind of similar calls. However, the red kite has a very rapid mewing, and it's a very piercing whistling sound, as you'll hear, whereas the buzzard has a more cat-like mewing call. Okay, so where are we going to find the red kites? Red kites can be found in the following types of habitats: open countryside, wooded valleys, farmland, towns and cities, and there are a number of red kite feeder stations in the UK, which I'll mention in the video. And as you can see from this map, there are certain concentrations around the country, from the Chilterns in the south to Wales, Harewood House certainly in Leeds in Yorkshire, which I've travelled to a number of times, fantastic venue to see them, and then up into Scotland, and the feeding station at Argati, and there's also a feeder station at Gigrin in Wales. Red kites are slowly but surely beginning to spread out, and as I've said, they're mainly found in open countryside and wooded valleys. You can get sightings of them in and around towns and cities, and I've seen them in my local area within about 2 to 3 miles of my house. They're starting to beginning to become a little bit more common here in North Nottinghamshire in England. If you have red kites in your area, you're certainly going to find them in and around farmland in search of food. And there's no better time to go out and photograph red kites than at harvest time, because it tends to bring birds in and concentrate them on searching for food. For the real close-up views of the red kite, then the feeder stations, as I mentioned, at Argati in Scotland and at Gigrin Farm in Wales, they're the places to go where you'll get up close to them, but that can cost time and travel, and obviously it costs money. Okay, so that leads me to my first tip, which is tip number 5, and that's to do with feeder stations. If you want to get up close, real close to red kites, then visit one of the red kite feeder stations, as I previously mentioned. They supplement food for red kites all throughout the year, and you really will get up close to them. It's a great spectacle to watch, albeit it's kind of like artificial, kind of like feeding birds at a bird table. But their aerial acrobatics are absolutely spectacular and they're great to watch, and you can get some really good pictures which we'll look at later. These red kite feeder stations also have dedicated hides for photographers, and they're positioned purely for the photographer, and you get a little bit closer than the general public viewing areas. So tip number 5 is visit a red kite feeder station. When it comes to the red kite's diet, red kites are scavengers, and that's why you see them drifting around in the sky looking for food. But the typical diet consists of, well, scavengers, so they're looking for carrion. Other bits of their diet, they'll eat lots of worms, and they will also take small mammals. Red kites are very reluctant to actually land, and what they'll do is, if they see food on the ground, if they can pick it up, they'll swoop down, and again you'll see this in photographs and a little bit of video of them swooping down to actually take the food. And at the feeder station, as I said, they're very fast, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And red kites will also take food off the surface of water. Okay, so tip number 4 is harvest time. As I previously said, red kites will take advantage of any agricultural operations that are going on in and around farmland, especially at harvesting and ploughing. Again, you'll see it from the video. They can provide an easy food source for the red kites, such as I said, earthworms and small mammals that have been caught up in the harvesting operations. If you're lucky enough to witness this, this is when you can see them really in the wild and get up close to them in their natural environment, away from a feeder station. So I would put harvest time in front of the kite feeder station, if you're lucky enough to see it in action. Okay, what I want to do now is focus on focus on the photography side of photographing the red kite. When it comes to camera settings, I shoot with a Canon R5 and an RF 100 to 500. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the Canon system. The settings that I'm going to talk about are generic and apply to all camera brands, makes and models. So what we'll do is we'll look at autofocus to use, we'll look at frames per second, look at shutter speeds, look at the aperture, and also to finish that off, the focal length. When it comes to the autofocus system on your camera, birds in flight, make sure that you're on continuous. That ensures that as long as you've got the focus point on your subject, then your subject should be in focus. Change the autofocus zone. I tend to use either the 5-star system or the 9-star system, with the main focus point in the center. So expand your autofocus area to either the 5 or the 9 point for your autofocus system. When it comes to the frame rate, set it to the highest frame rate that you're comfortable with. As you can see, red kites can be very fast when they're in the dive, and they're very acrobatic as well, as you'll find out. Myself personally, I set my Canon R5 to 12 frames per second. When it comes to shutter speeds, I have 3 go-to settings. Obviously, you're going to be using high shutter speeds, so the higher your shutter speed, the higher your ISO is, so you need to be careful of the light. So my 3 go-to shutter speed settings are as follows. It's all handheld. For a stationary subject, it would be 1/500th of a second. For birds in flight, kites will glide a lot, so I'm going to start at around 1/1600th of a second. And then when the kites start to tumble in the air and dive, you're going to have to up your shutter speed, and I up mine to about 1/3200th of a second. Aperture. My go-to aperture for birds in flight is f8, especially for large birds like the red kite. As you're probably going to be shooting at distance, that should ensure that you get the entire bird in focus. So my go-to aperture is f8. When it comes to focal length, I would recommend between 300 to 500 millimeters focal length. You could go a little bit smaller than that, but the red kite feeder stations. I will be hand holding the majority of the time, so I'm happy to hand hold at 500 millimeters, ensuring that my shutter speed doesn't go below 1/500th of a second, as I said earlier. You could also use a wide angled lens for getting wide angled shots of the environment. Okay, tip number 3 is all to do about how to photograph red kites in flight. It's relatively pretty straightforward when the red kite is just drifting across the sky on an open wing. However, your photography skills are going to be tested when you actually see the red kites twisting and turning in the sky and diving. What I would recommend that you do is you get the easy shots in the bag first, and then try for the more challenging acrobatic shots in flight of the red kite. These next series of images that you're going to see were taken at a feeder station, where the red kites were pretty much in a feeding frenzy, as you will see. The only way to get good images was to actually focus on the ground, wait for the birds to swoop down, and then fire off a burst of shots at 12 frames a second, and hope that you're going to get your birds or the red kites in focus. And that's how it worked for me. Focused on the ground, wait for the kites to enter the area, and just fired off at 12 frames per second. Tip number 2 in how to photograph the red kite is to try and get onto a bit of high ground so that the kites are just below you, or preferably parallel to where you are on the high ground, so that you can photograph them. As we've seen, kites will glide along quite easily and you can get some good shots, but what you really want is to do is try and find a piece of high ground which is above the kites, so that they can come to you. Tip number 1 in photographing the red kite is all to do with the head and the eyes of the kite. As we've seen, the red kite has a stunning grey silver head to it, with a stunning beautiful yellow eye, and that needs to be the centre of the focus of your attention when you're focusing on the bird. So tip number 1 is to try and focus on the head and the eye of the red kite. Okay, what I want to do now is just leave you with some of my favourite images of the red kite, and I hope that you enjoy them. Thanks for watching this edition of Kevin Hatley Photography and how to photograph the red kite. I hope you've enjoyed it just as much as I have. Thoroughly enjoyed filming these beautiful birds of prey. They're absolutely, if you can get up close to them, as I've said, you can get some fantastic photographs. All I would ask is that if you've liked this, could you hit the like button? Could also ask you to consider subscribing to my channel, Kevin Hatley Photography. It's completely free, it doesn't cost anything, and what it does is it just helps me to grow my channel and share with you and others my knowledge and experience of photographing wildlife, especially here in the UK. I'm always learning and I get great enjoyment out of doing it. So until the next time, stay safe, take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye for now.